I hadn't eaten in 2 days. The gnawing hunger clawed at my insides, making it hard to think straight. The streets had been cruel, and survival had turned into a daily battle. I wasn't sure I was winning. But that morning, something told me my life was about to change. I just didn't know how yet. I walked past a rundown house at the edge of town, its white picket fence barely standing. One of the panels had collapsed onto the sidewalk. It looked like the whole thing was about to fall apart. That's when I saw him. An old man, frail yet determined, struggling to lift a wooden plank back into place. His hands trembled as he tried to balance it, his face creased with frustration. The moment I saw the sweat dripping down his wrinkled brow, something in me shifted. Need a hand? I found myself asking. The old man looked up, startled. His sharp, piercing eyes studied me, reading me in a way no one had in a long time. He saw me, not just some homeless kid. "You any good with a hammer?" he asked, his voice rough with age. I nodded, even though I'd never held one in my life. But I could learn. "Then get over here," he said. "This fence won't fix itself." And just like that, my life took a turn I never saw coming. The old man handed me a hammer, his fingers surprisingly firm for someone his age. "You ever built anything before?" he asked. I hesitated. "Not really." He let out a gruff chuckle. "Well, no better time to start." He guided my hands as I positioned the nail. My grip was unsteady, but he didn't criticize. Instead, he nodded. "Tap it first, get it set. Then drive it in." I followed his instructions. The first strike was weak, the nail barely moving. But on the second, it sank deeper. By the fourth, it was in place. A strange sense of satisfaction settled in my chest. I hadn't felt useful in a long time. "You're a quick learner," he said. I glanced at him. "Thanks." His eyes softened for a fraction of a second. "What's your name, kid?" "Logan." He nodded. "Name's Henry." For the first time in months, I wasn't just some nameless kid on the street. I was Logan, and I had a job to do. By the time we finished fixing the collapsed panel, my stomach growled so loud it was impossible to ignore. Henry heard it. "Come inside. You look like you could use a meal." I hesitated. I'd learned the hard way not to trust too easily. But something about Henry was different. He didn't look at me with pity, just matter-of-fact kindness. Inside, the house smelled of old wood and coffee. He set a plate of scrambled eggs and toast in front of me. I hesitated. "Go on," he said. "Food's not meant to be stared at." I picked up the fork, and the first bite almost brought tears to my eyes. I hadn't had a hot meal in weeks. As I ate, Henry sipped his coffee. "You got a place to stay?" I shook my head. He sighed, rubbing his temple. Then he leaned back in his chair. "You willing to work?" I straightened. "Yeah." "Then I got a deal for you. You help me fix up this place, and I'll give you a roof over your head. No freeloading, real work." I stared at him, stunned. "You serious?" "Dead serious." It wasn't just an offer. It was hope. And for the first time in forever, I took a chance on it. Sleeping on a bed felt unnatural at first. The mattress was soft, the blankets warm, but my mind kept waiting for the cold concrete to press against my back. I kept waking up, expecting to hear sirens, distant shouting, or worse, someone kicking me awake to chase me off. But nothing came. Just silence. As I stared at the ceiling, I wondered why Henry had taken me in. People didn't do that without expecting something in return. I'd learned that lesson the hard way. Henry wasn't a man of many words, but he expected hard work. "Fixing this place up isn't just about repairs," he said. "It's about earning your keep. You ready for that?" I nodded. "Yeah." The days turned into a routine. Henry taught me how to sand wood, how to mix cement, how to fix leaks. It was the first time I had structure, the first time I wasn't just drifting. And with every nail I hammered in, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Purpose. I thought I could leave my past behind. But the streets don't forget. One night, as I was locking up the shed, I heard a voice that sent a chill down my spine. Well, look who cleaned up nice." I turned to see Trey, one of the guys I used to run with. He wasn't alone. What do you want? I asked, my fists clenching. He smirked. Just checking on an old friend. But I knew Trey. And I knew trouble was never far behind. Trey's smirk didn't sit right with me. It wasn't just a casual visit. It never was with him. You're looking real comfortable here, Trey said, eyeing the house behind me. Didn't take you for the fixed fences and playhouse type. I crossed my arms. What do you want, Trey? He stepped closer, lowering his voice. We've got something big coming up, Logan. And we need someone like you. A couple of stores, easy hits, quick cash. I clenched my jaw. I'm done with that. Trey chuckled. That's so? 'Cause last I checked, the streets don't let people just walk away. I didn't flinch. I couldn't afford to. I'm not on the streets anymore. Trey's smirk faded. His eyes darkened. You think some old man and a hammer make you one of them? He jerked his head toward the house. You really think you belong here? I didn't answer. Trey leaned in, voice dropping lower. I'll be back. And when I am, you better remember where you came from. With that, he turned and disappeared into the night, leaving me standing in the cold, fists clenched, a war raging inside me. I didn't tell Henry about Trey. I figured if I ignored it, it would go away. But deep down, I knew better. That night, sleep didn't come easy. Trey's words kept playing in my head. You really think you belong here? I wanted to. More than anything. Morning came too fast. I found Henry outside, inspecting the fence. You look like hell, he grumbled. I forced a smirk. Didn't sleep great. He gave me a long look, then turned back to the fence. Whatever it is, don't let it mess with your head. You keep your hands busy, your mind stays clear. I didn't ask how he knew. I just picked up the hammer and got to work. 3 days passed. I told myself Trey wouldn't come back, that he'd move on. I was wrong. I came back from a hardware run to find Henry standing by the porch, his hands gripping the railing too tight. What's wrong? I asked. He jerked his chin toward the fence. My stomach dropped. Spray painted across the wood in bold red letters. Streets don't forget. My blood ran cold. Henry's voice was even, but there was steel behind it. Friends of yours? I swallowed hard. Not anymore. Henry exhaled slowly, then nodded. Good. Because if they were, I'd tell you to deal with it. Fast. A warning. Not a threat, but a clear line drawn in the sand. I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't over. Henry wasn't the type to lecture, but that night, he sat across from me at the dinner table, eyes sharp. You still got one foot in your old life, Logan. That won't work here. I gritted my teeth. I didn't ask for this. No, he said. But you let it in. I hated how right he was. Henry leaned forward. Let me tell you something about the past. It don't just disappear. It follows you until you make it stop. I exhaled. And how do I do that? He studied me for a long moment, then said, by proving to yourself that you don't need it anymore. The way he said it, like he'd fought this battle himself, I knew he wasn't just talking about me. I should have gone to Trey. Should have told him straight to his face that I was out for good. But I didn't. And that was my mistake. Because the next morning, I found the front door cracked open. Henry never left it unlocked. I stepped inside, heart pounding. Henry? Silence. Then in the kitchen, I saw it. A single knife, stabbed into the wooden table. A message. And just like that, I knew Trey wasn't done with me yet. I stormed out of the house and went straight to the only place I knew Trey would be, the abandoned gas station on the edge of town. He was there, leaning against a rusted-out car, grinning like he'd been expecting me. Took you long enough, he said. I marched up to him. Stay away from Henry. This is between me and you. Trey tilted his head. Nah. See, I don't like being ignored, Logan. I clenched my fists. I'm not coming back. His smile faded. That's so. He moved fast. Too fast. 1 second he was in front of me. The next, his fist slammed into my gut. I staggered back, gasping for air. Trey grabbed my collar, yanking me close. You don't walk away, he hissed. You don't get a new life. You owe us. I met his eyes, pain rippling through me, but I didn't look away. No, I gritted out. I don't. Trey pushed me back, letting me fall. You'll regret this. Then he walked away. And I knew. I had just made my first real enemy. When I got back to Henry's, he was waiting on the porch. He took one look at me and sighed.
So,
That's how it went. I sat down beside him, still catching my breath. They won't stop.
Henry studied me.
Then we make them. I frowned.
What?
Henry's gaze was hard, unshaken. You think I've never had people come knocking, demanding things from me? You think I got this house, this life, by letting them walk all over me? I stared at him. For the first time, I realized Henry wasn't just some old man. He had a past too. And he wasn't afraid of a fight. Henry didn't say much after Trey's attack, but I could feel the shift in him. The air around him hardened, like a man preparing for battle. The next morning, he tossed me a heavy bag. Come on. I caught it, my ribs still aching from Trey's punch. What's this? Supplies. I followed him to the backyard, where he dumped out the bag, boards, nails, thick chains, and locks. We're reinforcing the house, he said. If they come back, they'll find out we're not easy targets. I hesitated. You really think they'll try again? Henry met my eyes. I don't think. I know. Something about the way he said it sent a chill down my spine. We worked side by side, securing windows, fixing weak spots in the fence, making sure no one could break in without a fight. As we hammered nails into the wooden panels, I finally asked the question that had been haunting me. Who were you before all this? Henry paused, staring at the half-finished fence. A man who made a lot of mistakes. I waited, but he didn't say more. Instead, he handed me another plank. Lesson 1, Logan, if you don't protect what's yours, someone will take it. I didn't know if he was talking about the house, or something else entirely. 2 nights later, I found something new waiting on the porch. A dead rat. I stared at it, my gut twisting. Trey was sending a message. Henry stepped out behind me, sighing at the sight. That's cute, he muttered. I glanced at him. You don't seem worried. He shrugged. I've seen worse. I swallowed hard. They won't stop, will they? Henry exhaled. Not until you make them. And for the first time I realized this fight wasn't just about Trey. It was about proving once and for all that I wasn't that scared street kid anymore. That night, I woke to a noise. A soft scrape, followed by a creak. I sat up, heart pounding. Then I heard it, footsteps inside the house. I grabbed the hammer from beside my bed and crept toward the noise. A shadow moved in the kitchen. My breath caught in my throat. Then, a flick of a lighter.
Trey.
His face lit up in the orange glow, eyes gleaming with amusement. Nice place you got here, he murmured. Real cozy. Rage surged through me. Get out. He smirked. Or what? Then, suddenly, Henry's voice from the dark. He said, get out. A metallic click. Trey froze. I turned and saw Henry standing in the hallway, holding a shotgun. Trey raised his hands, but he wasn't scared. You really gonna shoot me, old man? He taunted. Henry didn't blink. Try me. A tense silence stretched between them. Then Trey laughed. This ain't over, he said, backing toward the door. You can play house all you want, Logan. But deep down, you know what you are. I didn't respond. He slipped out, and Henry waited until the door clicked shut before lowering the gun. Go back to bed, he muttered. But I knew neither of us would sleep that night. The next day, Trey sent a message. Not a threat this time. An invitation. I found the note stuffed in the fence. One last job. No strings. Walk away rich. Meet me at the docks. Midnight. I stared at the words, my pulse pounding. One last job. I could get the money and leave this life behind for good. But deep down, I knew that was a lie. Because once you take the bait, they own you forever. I didn't tell Henry about the note. But that evening, he watched me too closely. Finally, he spoke. You gonna tell me what's on your mind? I hesitated. Then I showed him the note. He studied it, then tossed it onto the table. You going? I met his gaze.
No.
He nodded. Good. Then he stood stretching. Get some rest.
And that was it.
No lecture. No warnings. Just trust. And that meant more than anything. Midnight came, and I stayed in my bed. But Trey wasn't one to take no for an answer. A sudden crash shattered the silence. I bolted upright. Glass breaking. Footsteps pounding outside. Then, the front door slammed open. Trey's voice rang through the house. Should have taken the deal, Logan. And I knew this was war. They came in fast, 3 of them.
Trey.
His right-hand man, Duke. And another guy I didn't recognize. Henry was already up, shotgun in hand. Get out, he ordered. Trey smirked. Not without what we came for. Henry didn't flinch. Last warning. Duke moved first. A knife flashed. Henry pulled the trigger. A deafening blast. The wall behind Duke exploded in splinters. He stumbled back, cursing. But Trey didn't move. He was smiling. You don't have the guts, he said. Henry's finger twitched on the trigger. Try me. Everything happened at once. Trey lunged. I grabbed a chair and swung it into his ribs. He went down hard, gasping. Duke grabbed Henry. I tackled him. We hit the ground, struggling. His knife slashed. Pain exploded in my shoulder. But I didn't stop. I wrestled the blade away and punched him hard. He crumpled. And just like that, it was over. Trey lay on the floor, coughing. He looked up at me, eyes filled with something I didn't expect.
Hate.
But also defeat. You really think you're better than us? He spat. I stared at him, and for the first time, I knew the answer. Yes. The distant sound of sirens cut through the heavy silence. Trey was still on the floor, glaring at me as he clutched his ribs. Duke lay unconscious, and the third guy had already taken off running. Henry didn't lower the shotgun. He just kept his gaze locked on Trey. You should have walked away, Henry said, his voice colder than I'd ever heard it. Trey coughed, his smirk faltering for the first time. This ain't over. I shook my head. Yeah, Trey. It is. Blue and red lights flashed through the windows as the police pulled up. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't the one running. The cops swarmed in fast, weapons drawn. Henry put his hands up, slowly lowering the shotgun. The lead officer, a woman with sharp eyes, glanced between us. Somebody want to tell me what the hell happened here? I took a deep breath. They broke in. They attacked us. She studied me, then Henry, then the wrecked house. Trey groaned as an officer yanked him to his feet. This kid's a liar, he spat. He used to run with us. The officer raised an eyebrow. Yeah? And yet, you're the ones bleeding on the floor. I stood tall. I'm not one of them anymore. For the first time, I believed it. Trey and Duke were hauled off in cuffs. One officer stayed behind to take our statements. Henry was short and to the point. Self-defense, he said. The cop sighed, rubbing his temples. I'll file the report, but you should be careful. These guys don't let things go easy. Henry just nodded. I didn't miss the way he glanced at me, his expression unreadable. As the cops drove off, Henry finally spoke. You did good, kid. I swallowed the lump in my throat. I didn't feel good. He gave me a knowing look. It will. The house was a disaster. Broken furniture, shattered glass, dents in the walls from the fight. I sighed. Where do we even start? Henry tossed me a broom. Same way we always do. One piece at a time. So we worked. No talking, just fixing. The same way we'd started. By the time the sun came up, the place was still rough, but it was standing. And so was I. We sat on the porch, exhausted. After a long silence, I finally spoke. Who were you before this place, Henry? He exhaled, staring out at the road. Someone who ran from a lot of things. I waited. Finally, he continued. Used to be in business. Real estate. Made good money. But I let greed get ahead of me. Screwed over the wrong people. Lost everything. I frowned. So how do you end up here? Henry chuckled dryly. Bought this place with the last of my money. Thought I'd fix it up, sell it, start over. But turns out, I liked the work more than the money.
He looked at me.
And then you showed up. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't doing this alone. The lump in my throat returned. I guess we both needed this place, I murmured. Henry nodded. Yeah, kid. We did. The next few weeks were different. The work didn't just feel like work anymore. It felt like something bigger. Trey's shadow still lingered in my mind, but it didn't control me. Henry wasn't just an old man who took me in.
He was my family.
And for the first time, I wasn't just surviving. I was living. One evening, as we packed up for the day, Henry tossed something at me. I caught it instinctively. A set of keys. I frowned. What's this? Henry leaned against the porch railing, arms crossed. You fixed this place, Logan. You made it yours. I stared at him, heart pounding. You serious? He nodded. This house was always meant to be passed down to someone who'd take care of it. And I think you've earned that. I swallowed hard. Henry, He cut me off. No speeches, kid. Just don't mess it up. A slow smile crept onto my face. For the first time, I wasn't homeless. I wasn't lost. I had a home. And I wasn't going anywhere.